In this video, I'm going to give you my review of Cloudways hosting. Cloudways is what I use for WordPress hosting. They can host other types of systems, but I want to compare this to some of the popular managed WordPress hosting sites and show you why you're better off with Cloudways for better performance and probably a lower price. Hi, my name is William Beam with Suburbia Press, and we're trying to help small business entrepreneurs who are online make the most of their technology, understand how it works. And today, one of the things I want to do is show you why Cloudways is a better option than sites like SiteGround, WP Engine, WPX Hosting. I've used a number of these things in the past. I thought they were great when I started, and then I found out that there are limitations and there are things that they aren't telling you about performance. So I want to show you an article, and I'll leave a link to that in the description below so you can read it in full on your own. But basically, it mirrors what I've learned about hosting and why something like a Cloudways virtual private server, or VPS, is really going to be the best option for people who are in business running WordPress sites and businesses, or maybe something else, maybe Magento for a shopping or e-commerce site. But let me show you what we've got. All right, so this is one of a few articles I've read. Basically, I was searching for what is it that takes WordPress and makes it perform. With Google's Core Web Vitals, looking at specific criteria, performance is definitely a key indicator for search engine optimization. It starts with your hosting, and there are a lot of caches, there are a lot of performance products. I use them and they do help, but they cannot overcome a lack of resources. And that's the problem with most managed WordPress hosting sites. So for example, we're going to come down here and it'll start off with this comment that more server power costs, but it's a good investment because of what you need to consider for WordPress performance. Cost is not as bad as you might think. There are definitely some extensive providers out there. Cloudways is not one of them. It is solid. It's using some of the same infrastructure that services like WP Engine use, but not charging as much. But here's what you're looking for. You're looking for storage space and disk type, working memory, where is the server, and of course, the CPU. The first thing that we really talk about is the CPU. The more cores, the better. When you look at WP Engine, WPX, SiteGround, you're not going to find any mention of how much CPU resource they've allocated to you. You know that you're dealing with shared hosting. In other words, there are going to be multiple sites, WordPress sites, loaded on the same server, but you don't know how many neighbors you have on a server. You don't know what allocation of the CPU you have. You don't even know where that server is located. So these are things you might want to keep in mind when you're evaluating your next host for WordPress. Basically, the more cores, the better. One of the things I like about working with Cloudways, you can choose your server and you can choose the RAM and CPU resources. So I'll show you what mine looks like later on in this video. But the more cores, the more processes can happen simultaneously, and that is a performance indicator. If you can do two things at once instead of one, you're going to be that much faster. Your hard disk speed is really going to be important as well too. So not only do you need capacity, but you need speed. Solid state drives are up to 20% faster, or 20 times faster than hard disk drives. That is a key indicator you want to look at as well. What kind of drives are they using and what kind of performance? Because the longer it takes for your computer to go to the disk drive, retrieve some data, and send it back is a delay in your website performance. The next item that we're looking at is memory. How much RAM are you allocated? My previous host was WPX, and with the plan that I had, they allocated 256 megabytes of memory to a host. If you got a higher plan, you might get 512, but usually it was 256 megabytes of RAM, not even a full gigabyte of RAM. Then the next thing down was PHP. The PHP workers have a separate RAM space. So I had a couple of PHP workers. So they were trying to tell me that if you combine my RAM and the PHP workers, I had 768 megabytes of RAM available to me. It doesn't quite work out that way. The more PHP workers and memory limit for them is helpful, but also there's RAM that you need to have for your internal storage. So let's take a look at Basically, the more you can get, the better. And that allows you to keep things in RAM for quick storage and retrieval. So that way you're not waiting on delay time going to and from a disk. Basically, RAM storage is ready to work material. Things can be served up quickly. PHP is basically the process that WordPress works on. If you log in, it'll be yourdomainname.com/wp-login.php. These scripts that work on PHP are going to require some memory. How much memory are they assigning to each one of these workers? And that may affect also how often do they have to go back and forth to the drive. So you can have the standard host, it says here, between 100 megabytes to 128. More powerful ones have 256 megabytes. On Cloudways, you can make your own determination of what you want for a limit on these on the PHP workers. And lastly, the server location. The closer it is to your customer, the better. Now, if you have global sites, you may need a content delivery network. You may need multiple servers and a way to differentiate that. But it depends on where you are and where your customers are. And usually, for most websites, I think there's a predominant location that works best. And for example, if you're in the United States like I am, you probably don't want a server in London or in Taiwan or any of a number of other foreign locations. You're going to want something that's in the United States. Whether it's going to be San Francisco, New York, Atlanta, Miami, that's a different choice as well. And it may depend upon if you have a geographic location for your customer base. So for example, if you serve people in Atlanta, then having a server in Atlanta is your best idea, not one in Miami. So the hardware, the location, the resources of your server is of paramount importance to the speed that you get from your WordPress or other website host. But the other part we talked about was price. So let's take a look. All right, so here we are on WP Engine, and they're going to give you all sorts of sales reasons and all sorts of things like this in order to buy them. And it's the world's #1 managed WordPress hosting platform. Just like McDonald's is the world's #1 hamburger vendor. Doesn't mean it's the best. It just means that it's more popular than anything else. The way that WP Engine gets performance is the same as SiteGround or WPX. They cache the snot out of everything. In other words, if you have a blog with static content, this may work for you. And that's because the caching will not have to go to the disk. It will just say, oh, I've already got that page in memory. Let me give it to you. The problem is if you run a dynamic site, such as if you're a course creator, everybody who logs in is going to look at something different because it's going to be personalized for them. The course video that I look at is going to be different than the course video that you look at. The same thing with a membership site. People are going to be going in, looking at their own private configuration of your website. All the data is going to be posted dynamically. If you're a coach, you may have something similar. If you're an e-commerce site, people are going to be looking at different pages as well there that are dynamically produced for them. So in other words, these are pages that can't be reasonably cached, or else people aren't going to get current information. If they give a cached page that's old and out of date, it doesn't reflect changes that they just made, it's useless to them. But if you're just running a blog, you have static information for WP Engine, WPX, SiteGround, sites like that, that's where they excel. They're expecting you to have a very flat site that does not change. As soon as you're in business and you're working with things that do change, things that are dynamic, then you've got a problem. So let's take a look about their pricing. So they've got a number of different tabs over here. So your startup, $25 a month. That's billed annually for $300 a year. For that, you get a few themes. You get free automated migrations, which most of these providers will provide you with a free migration, daily backups, a free certificate, and again, most of them will provide you with a free certificate. I would not do business with any web host that would not give you a free SSL certificate, and a one-click staging site. So what do you get out of that? You can have one site, and you've got a cap here, 25,000 visits per month. So in other words, if you get popular, they're going to charge you more for your success. Local storage, you get 10 gig, and also your bandwidth. If you're running a photography site, kind of like I do on one of my sites, you're going to take more bandwidth simply because you have more images. Well, you've got a cap on your bandwidth. And the same thing kind of goes along as you move here. Again, these prices are based upon, $49 per month based upon yearly paying. In other words, you're buying into this for a year. And if you find out it's not right for you, you've got probably a limited time that you can go in and cancel. But that's a pain because now you've got a site that suddenly you've got to move to yet another host. So that's why it's important to make sure that you get the right site up front. So a few different changes. Now you can have 3 sites. You get a few more visits. You get a little bit more storage and a little bit more bandwidth. The plan that I had when I was with them was this growth plan. And I was paying $100 a month. And I got 24/7 support, which 24/7 support means somebody's working. It doesn't mean that you get instant support from them. So you have to wait. You may have to wait a while before you get a response. And again, 10 sites included. When I was with them, I got 10 sites. Then for a period, they reduced this to 5 sites at the same price. And then finally, now they've come back up again. So 100,000 visits per month, 20 gigs, 200 gigabit of bandwidth, and you can see how it goes on and up. Now, if you want to change this, we can go over here to monthly pricing. And if you want to go to month, you can see how the prices have suddenly gone up. $30, $59, $115, and so on. That's what you're going to get. And keep this number in mind, this $115. What you don't see here is any mention of what resources you get. There's no mention of RAM. There's no mention of where your server is going to be located. There's no mention of CPU cores. There's no mention of PHP workers. They don't tell you. If we come over here to WPX, that's where I went to after I had problems with WP Engine. It's kind of the same thing. I like these folks better. Let's go over here to WordPress hosting. First off, the prices were much better. So we're looking at annual pricing right now. I got the professional plan. Instead of 10 sites, I got 15 sites. And look at the difference in price. Instead of nearly $100 a month, $41.58. It was much more cost effective to get the same kind of service from WPX than from WP Engine. 20 gigs of storage is not that much, 200 gigabits of bandwidth, and they have their own cloud CDN, which some of these places, much like WP Engine, offer you a CDN. Doesn't mean they're really great or really the best thing to have. It means they have one. Cloudways is a different kind of provider. They are not the people hosting the servers. They are a front end to different providers, some of who also provide services for WP Engine and WPX. But you've got a few other options. So as it says, up to 5 cloud providers. Let's take one like DigitalOcean. Years ago, I used DigitalOcean for one of my employers, and it was just basically a Linux server. It did not have a graphical user interface. I went in and I had to do my work through the command line, and that's what I did. I was in IT. I worked technical issues, so I could do that. Most people who are working for a business themselves don't really have the time or the patience to learn the ins and outs of server management and server configuration. What happens here with this cloud hosting with Cloudways, they provide a user interface that is easy to understand, easy to operate, and does all the things that I used to have to do manually through a command line interface. So you've got up to 5 cloud providers. You have unlimited applications. And by applications, WordPress would be considered an application. And I'll show you an example of this in the video. And of course, you can see that they've got their support 24/7. They've got automated backups. They have monitoring. And you can also extend that with New Relic monitoring. We'll show that. And then they also have a built-in CDN, which you can use or not use. And basically, it just makes it very easy to work with. So you can have options to select your application. So for my case, WordPress, you can see that they have others over here, and select your server. So you've got Google Compute, Amazon Web Services. Those are the 2 that power WP Engine. And this one over here in the middle is Vultr. And that's the one that I've liked. They've got a specific high performance server. There's also DigitalOcean and Linode. And you can scale your server size. So let's go take a look at our pricing. And I want to show you how the server selection works, because when we talk about the importance of knowing what resources you have on your server and where it is, this is going to tell you because you're going to choose what you want. So for pricing, it depends on how you pick your server. You can see that the lowest price is $10 per month, and you can go up and up. I've gotten, my choice is this 4 gigabyte 2-core server, and you can also go for a premium one, which I did. So there's a little bit more here. So what I did was I selected Vulture, and you'll notice depending on which one you select, the prices are going to be different. Some of them have premium versions and some of them do not. And I found, as far as the performance, doing my research, Vulture high frequency was the best performing for WordPress. It outperformed AWS, it outperformed Google Cloud, and all these others. So a Vulture high frequency is the one that I recommend for people who are doing business. And you don't have to get necessarily the $50 per month. This one for $26 a month would probably be good for many business users. I am putting more things on my server than I think some other folks would. So you have to decide how many sites are you putting on your server and how much performance do you need. And you notice that they tell you how much RAM you get, how many cores you get, how much disk storage do you get, and how much bandwidth. Remember, we were looking at 200 megabytes of bandwidth? Well, you start off with 1 terabyte on the lowest plan over here. I've got up to 3 terabytes of bandwidth. I've got 128 gigs of storage. The other thing I want to show you is, notice over here it says monthly or hourly. There is no annual plan. You can actually configure a server for a short period of time. Maybe you want to do some testing and evaluate it, or do some specific application for a period of time, and you can actually use it by the hour. So here, about 7 cents per hour, you could use it and then be done. But for most of us, we're going to choose a monthly plan. There's no long-term contract. You can get in for a month, and then when you're done, you can get out if you want to. For the other sites, remember that their best pricing had an annual commitment. In other words, you were stuck with them for a year. Whether you found problems or not, getting out of it was probably not going to happen unless you got out during their trial period. Some of them will give you a free trial. For example, Cloudways will give you a free trial. You can check this out before you're committed to it. And it says right here, no lock-in, freely use our services without being tied into a contract. All right, so let me go ahead and show you my back end. Okay, we're logged into my account or my portal. You can see that up here, there's servers and there's applications. I only have one server. So if we go ahead and click on this, you can see that there's a number of elements over here. I have 4 gigabytes, 128 gig space. I've got my IP address, and I'm located in Atlanta on a Vulture server. And this is specifically a Vulture high frequency server. So I can come down here to managing my services. The reason monitoring isn't working for me right now is because this New Relic is the monitoring system. So it's Comprehensive Insights. It's New Relic is a third party. Matter of fact, one of my friends I used to work with at Lucent is working with New Relic. I have that stopped. I have not set this up, and that's okay. But everything else, you can see how easy it is. Redis and Varnish are both caching systems. And Redis typically holds the whole data set in memory. Varnish kind of sits between your server and the client's browser. It's a different kind of caching. And if you use WP Rocket, it will automatically detect Varnish and configure itself for that. And of course, you can start and stop, or you can purge your caching anytime you want to. I don't want to go over each one of these settings and packages. I want to do some videos where we dive deeper into this, but I just kind of want to give you a look at what you have. So you can see, you can set your upload size for a maximum. You can set the amount of memory that a PHP request is allowed to allocate. So I've got that set at 256, which is pretty good. I could still go higher if I wanted to, but for right now, I don't see any need for it to be any larger. Also, you can set your time zone. We'll come over here to advanced, and you can have a number of variables. If you don't know what these are, leave them at the defaults. They've already got these optimized very well, I think, for the majority of people. I would say unless you have a need to change some of these, I wouldn't change them. So if you look at the packages, you can see there's your PHP versions, your MySQL versions, and you've got options of what these are. So I'll go back and do a video on configuring this and kind of give you a walkthrough of what they are. Basically gives you some options here. So for disk cleanup, and you can turn this, do you want it to happen automatically or not? And all I've got running is, remove some temporary files not needed. But you can go ahead and set some more cleanups, and then you can just go ahead and run them manually. And then, of course, there are maintenance options over here, and you can schedule your server time when that happens. There are times you may need to whitelist some URLs. So, for example, you can see I've got one here, and you can add to it. You can also choose, is it you're going to be allowing IP addresses, or do you want to block everything except for the ones on the whitelist? So you've got some control over that. And then on your MySQL, again, you can do kind of the same thing. I don't have anything there. Now, vertical scaling lets you choose the size of your server. So you might want to start off small, and then if you run into issues, you can go ahead and increase, and you'll see what the cost difference is as you move this. So if I went ahead and moved over here, I'd go up to $100 a month and click this button to commit, which I'm not going to do. But the idea is, as you grow, you can see for yourself what resources you're getting. And so you can go ahead and change the scale of your server side. Now, also note it's got a warning here that scaling down is possible, but through the cloning feature. In other words, it'll set up a different server and it'll clone things over to it and with fewer resources, not necessarily just adding resources to the server you have. You have backups, and you can schedule the time for when they happen, how often, how long you want to retain them. Do you want to have local backups? You can get that. And my current backup size, you can see, is right over here. And then, of course, you can do an on-demand backup. And this is your mail server. I am not using SMTP through this server. You can have an add-on subscription to it. I use Fluent CRM, and I've got a different configuration for my email. But let's go ahead and come back over here to servers. And if you want to add a server, let me show you what the process is. First thing it's going to say is select your application. So it has some things in here that you can just put on your own. So if you want to do the Magento, that's the e-commerce server, PHP Custom App, WooCommerce. Some people like WooCommerce. I prefer having external cart. But let's say WordPress. And you want a multi-site, do you want a regular site, or do you want a clean, which means that no Cloudways optimization? I prefer choosing this one with their optimizations in place. They have their own caching plugin called Breeze, and I think it gives you a nice start. So you can give it a name. Let's just say I'm going to put it under my name, and then you can select a project. I've got a few over here. So there's a project for business, one for my wife, one for me. Let's put this under Suburbia Labs. Then you're going to choose which type of server do you want. In other words, these different businesses. If you want to go with the Google Cloud platform, you've got a lot of options over here. I don't really like this small, medium, large, and XL because it doesn't mean anything to me. But the one I'm recommending is the Vulture, and again, high frequency. And that's the one that's got the best performance. You don't have as many options for the configuration, but you know exactly what you're going to get. So it defaulted to 4 gigabytes of RAM. I could come down to 2. If I try to come down to 1, I'm going to get this warning message. And that's because it knows I've already chosen WordPress. And it says recommended 2 gigabyte or higher for production websites. 1 gigabyte is for WordPress, for staging, or low traffic situations. If you're running a blog and you're not getting that much traffic, you can start here. It's not going to be a problem because you're still going to have a lot more resources than you would get from WP Engine or WPX or SiteGround for $10 a month. Compare that to $30 a month at WP Engine, and you can see you get better performance, more resources, and you can also get to choose your location. So if we come down here, you can see that I've got options throughout the world. And, it defaults to Seattle, but maybe I want to go in Dallas. Maybe I want another one in Atlanta. Maybe I want one in Miami or New York. You can choose what you want. And then if you click launch now, basically that goes ahead and builds it. So for what we've selected, here we are, $13 per month. So I guess the $10 a month was without the higher frequency. Let me go change this to standard. And 1 gigabyte, $11 a month. Okay, that was in the ballpark. But that is my recommendation. I would start off with a Vulture, high frequency. If you're running a dynamic site, like if you got Buddy Boss as your platform and theme, if you're running LearnDash, if you're running things, like I said, for courses, coaching, memberships, I would at least get 2 gigabyte. If you look on the Buddy Boss site, they recommend at least 2 gigabyte. I run 4 gigabyte of RAM. It's excess of what I need for one Buddy Boss site, but I've got more than one Buddy Boss site. So that's why I've chosen to get something with a bit more RAM. And also, when you come over here, I want you to notice this is where you get the 2-core processor. If I come over here to this one, I only have a 1-core processor. So in order to get the best performance for the sites that I'm running at it, I'm working with this one. And for a business at about $50 a month, that's on par with what I was paying for WPX hosting. It's half the price of what you would pay with WP Engine. And it is better performance and better service than all of them. One of the ways I noticed this was twofold. First off, I would go to GT Metrics and the Google's PageSpeed Insights and other servers like Pingdom Tools. I never really got great performance. I might get up to, on GT Metrics, I might get up to a B grade. Usually it was a D or an E. And I had done everything. I'd put in WP Rocket, I'd put in Perf Matters, I'd put in all sorts of things to try and enhance my site. But those things don't work on dynamic sites. So I had to exclude a lot of things. When I looked at my WordPress dashboard, it took a long time to go from one page to the next. It was slow. I mean, molasses in winter kind of slow. Well, that's simply because there was not enough RAM. There were not enough CPU cores. I didn't have the resources for performance. So while the front end site was getting bad marks, the back end site was even worse. It was miserable to work with. Once I moved over to Cloudways and put on more resources, things changed as far as my performance scores. My back end performance was snappy, and my front end performance was getting A scores on GT Metrics. It was getting good scores on PageSpeed Insights. There are still things that you need to do on page and with some caching, but just having the right resources to run your application is really what was important. So that's why I'm going to recommend Cloudways for your WordPress hosting. There are other applications that you can run here, but I think that maybe I should show you a little bit. Okay, so we're on the GT Metrics site. I'm going to put in my server, and these are my results. So you can see this is Tuesday, August 31st, 2021. And my performance, 96%, structure, 100%. And all my core web vitals are giving me very good scores. And you can see that as far as the top issues, everything is showing as low impact. This same site was not scoring as well on WPX hosting or WP Engine hosting. It just simply didn't have the resources in order to score this well. Now, keep in mind, this is page by page. So I put in my home page, I can put in other pages and get different scores because each one's going to be built differently. But what you're going to find is the server resources are going to be the same. The differences you may find on page scores are going to be due to on-page elements, and those are things that you can fix. So, for example, maybe you've got too many containers if with an Elementor page build site, or even a Gutenberg site. If you have too many containers, it builds up your DOM, it slows down your website. Those kind of things create problems, and it doesn't matter which host you're on. But if you're looking at good scores on one page, you should have good scores on all pages if you have good on-page tactic. So remember, you can get started for free. Please go to suburbiapress.com/cloudways to get started. I'll put a link on the page here and in the description below. And I'm going to be doing some more videos showing you how this works. But if you have any questions about Cloudways versus some of the other managed hosting sites, I'll be happy to share what I know with you. So leave a comment down below. Let me know, what kind of site do you have? Are you running a business site that has people logging into it? Are you just doing affiliate marketing? And is this working for your budget? Let me know in the comments below. I'll be happy to help out and answer it. Finally, thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with me today. If you like this video, please go ahead, click the like button. That tells the YouTube overlords we did something right and they should share this with more people. Subscribe, you'll get more content like this, specifically on Cloudways and some other things that help small businesses. And click the bell notification icon if you want to get notified the next time I put a video out. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next video.